Hello, I'm going to show you some low-level TCP/IP code to interoperate with Redis, which is an open-source in-memory key-value store. Redis is often used as a database cache to make cloud-based applications more scalable by relieving the load on a relational database. I will give both C++ and VBA code that call a group of Win32 API functions known as Windows Sockets 2 or WinSock. This post follows on from the previous post where I detailed, both in text and video, number one, how to install Redis, how to get some data into and out of Redis using the command line tool Redis CLI, how to call Redis from a VB.NET console application, and how to call Redis from a VBA via a VB.NET COM DLL interop assembly. This post shows a solution that skips the .NET component and instead scripts directly against the Windows Sockets 2 API. Redis does not have an HTTP interface, and so we have to drop down a few layers and program sockets. If you're new to sockets, then here is a little explanation. When I say drop down a few layers, the diagram below is very useful. It illustrates the OSI model. When dealing with HTTP, we deal with the top layer of the OSI model, the application layer, or layer 7. Programming sockets means programming the transport layer of the OSI model. If you program a lower layer, then you can expect the code to be more complicated, unless of course you are given a high-level abstraction like the .NET Framework does. Forewarned of the increased complexity, let's look at some sample code. So Windows API functions, except .NET platform, are 99% designed to be used by C++ developers. Typically, when reading a Windows API documentation page, the sample code will be given in C++. It is a useful skill, therefore, to be able to get the C++ sample up and running so that you can step through and understand the code. You are best trying to run a sample from the most recently updated documentation page. Any compile errors can be Googled, and of course Stack Overflow is your friend. The C++ sample I began with was the receive function, which is defined in winsock.h and housed in the winsock2 DLL. The code can be found on this web page. I have copied this and I altered it, so I changed the port number to reflect the fact that we're using Redis. And sometimes you find you have to disable warnings so the sample code will work. In this instance, I had to add a pragma to disable this particular warning, and I found this out from Stack Overflow. Here is the full C++ code which calls into Redis, and I have that code in Visual Studio. So we can step through this. This is just a Windows 32 console program. So we set up some buffers, and then WinSock has to be initialized. And it doesn't throw errors. You have to test the return result to see if an error occurred. Sometimes a good result is it returns 0. Sometimes it returns a number indicating the number of bytes sent or received. So we've initialized WinSock, and then we create a socket, and we're asking for TCP. So then we set the IP address, which is localhost, and then we set the port number. Then we create a socket of passing in the address. With the socket created, we can start sending bytes. These bytes, this contains keys space star followed by a carriage return, which is what is used by Redis. Redis understands this to return the keys of the dictionary of the server. In this instance, it returns the number of bytes sent, so 8 bytes makes sense. Then, after we've finished sending, we can shut down that side. Then we wait to receive, so here we call the receive function, and in this case the return result is the number of bytes received, And down here you can see that the receive buffer has been populated, and you can see that it is populated with carriage returns. That's the /r/n. These are carriage returns. That's the C++ code. On the blog page, I then go on to give the VBA equivalent. So the Windows API functions are 99% designed to be used by C++ developers. VBA developers must find function declarations with compatible signatures that match. For this, Google is your friend, but after a while one gets familiar with passing pointers by using these three hidden, they're sort of undocumented, but here's a German page, if we can translate it. So there is some documentation out there. But this is the VBA, and let me just bring over the VBA implementation. And I'll just bring back, okay, so now we have these side by side. And you should be able to see, I'll just go down here. But once you have all your functions declared, we go find receive is here. That's the key one. And also send and connect. And you'll see that although they ask for pointers, by using a combination of byval and the long pointer, and then below we'll use var pointer, we can mimic passing in a car star. Let's just run this. So in this demo test we have a function called Windows sockets 2 send and receive. So we're going to send keys asterisk followed by a carriage return. And you can see that this very much mimics the code over here. So initialize WinSock. Where possible, I have transcribed it line for line. So we create a socket, good. Then we set the address, good. We connect, good. Then we send the data over, and we send 8 bytes, good. And then we set down the send part, good. And then we call receive, and we're expecting 24 bytes back, and we got those. That's good. And then we convert this, so the receive array is it's an array of bytes, and we want to put it as a string. We want to work with a string. So we just if I just show you what it contains, pretty much as you expect if you've worked with the command line. So you can see that's good. And then we clean up. And then, so we got the response, which is that, and then I've added a function here which interprets the response. And in this case, we have an array, so I am pulling out the keys and populating an array. And then printing them out. So there you go. That's Windows VBA. So that's Windows sockets, initially in C++, calling into Redis, but converted into VBA. So you can call Windows functions in VBA, so long as you get the signatures right, and so long as you get the var pointers right. So if when we sent over the original message, we say var pointer of the first element of the byte array, and that's the trick.